Eric Stanford and Samantha Quartz from FEMA's Buildings and Science Department. Thank you, Eric and Samantha.
Thanks, Loretta. Good afternoon, everyone. As Loretta said, my name is Samantha, and I'm here with my colleague Eric Stafford. We both work as contractors to FEMA's Building Science branch as wind engineering and building code subject matter experts. We'll go ahead and get started. Today we're going to discuss wind mitigation measures that you as homeowners can take either as do-it-yourself projects or with the help of contractors. And we're going to try and focus on the easier to implement and more cost-effective mitigation strategies. First, we're going to briefly cover some terms and acronyms to make sure we're all speaking the same language, and then what we hope you'll take away from today's presentation. We're going to briefly discuss the wind risks for Cameron and Calcasieu Parish, and then some different residential wind mitigation and retrofit measures for existing houses. And at the end, we'll go through some considerations for manufactured housing units and also considerations for new construction. We should have time left at the end for questions. However, feel free as we go along to enter your questions in the Q&A box. And Eric and I have some of our other colleagues here today, and they will answer them as they come in. Throughout the presentation, you'll see different FEMA building science publications that we've highlighted for you. FEMA recently reorganized their web pages, so the easiest way we found to get to what you want to look at is to go to Google or another search engine and enter the publication title and the number. You'll see on slides that we've got green boxes highlighted with those search terms. Also, Loretta uploaded all the documents discussed today into the Files tab that you should be able to see on your Adobe Connect. So here are some terms you'll hear throughout the presentation today. Mitigation, reducing the damage from natural disasters through building techniques or other measures. Compliance, meeting regulations or requirements such as those established by an adopted building code. When we talk about openings, we're talking about windows, skylights, entry doors, garage doors. And roof system, we're talking about the roof covering itself and then the roof structural system underneath. Two other terms to be aware of are substantial damage and substantial improvement. If your property is in a special flood hazard area within a community that participates in the NFIP, you're likely aware of these. Keep in mind that the origin of damage that the substantial damage determination is based upon can come from any source, so it can come from the wind or the flood from a hurricane, from a house fire, an earthquake. So if your property is assessed to have sustained more than 50% damage following an event, or if you're undertaking improvements above 50% of the market value of your home, you will be required to bring your home into compliance with the NFIP requirements for new construction. This will include the requirement that the lowest floor be elevated to or above the base flood elevation. We may not touch on this much today, but I just wanted to make you aware that wind damages can contribute to that percent of substantial damage that your home has sustained. This slide has some common acronyms that you'll hear used throughout the presentation. If there's one that you're unsure of or one that I use that isn't listed here, feel free to type it in the question box and someone will define it there for you. Another great resource that Region 6 put together is repairing and rebuilding after a hurricane. And it's got some relevant publications and contacts for you. The link is on the slide. It will also be up again at the end of the presentation today. So our overall objective today is to give you some recommendations for wind mitigation for your home that require a lower cost and a lower level of effort to implement. Measures are intended to minimize common wind damages to your home. This course will also provide background information that will help you be an informed consumer who's able to find the resources and or hire qualified contractors to help you. So before we get into the recommended mitigation actions, we'll briefly review the wind hazards in Cameron and Calcasieu Parish. Since both are coastal regions, there are threats from hurricanes, tropical storms, and tornadoes. Wind hazards inflict damage on the built environment through high wind pressures, windborne debris, and wind-driven rain. From their post-disaster investigations, FEMA has found that widespread wind damage to building envelopes components such as your roof covering, wall coverings, ventilation openings, windows, and doors often results in extensive and costly water intrusion from the wind-driven rain getting into your home. Quite a few of the mitigation actions we'll cover today focus on preventing wind-driven rain from getting into your house. Some general observations on this slide about wind hazards in the building code. Typically, older homes may not be as wind resistant as your newer homes that are built to current codes and standards. Something to keep in mind is that building codes are minimum requirements, and also residential buildings can suffer extensive wind damage when improperly designed and constructed. So the next two are just quick slides, which are going to show the current design wind speed for risk category 2 buildings, which is going to include your houses, your 1 and 2 family dwellings. Both parishes have adopted the 2015 IBC and IRC through a statewide mandate. The state also amended the code to allow wood structural panels for opening protection on every type of risk category 2 building, and Eric will talk more about this during his part of the presentation. So Cameron Parish has a design wind speed of 141 miles per hour, and Calcasieu Parish has one of 131 miles per hour. Both parishes are in the hurricane-prone region as defined by ASC 710, and ASC 710 is the reference standard for both 2015 IBC and IRC. Both parishes also have an area in the windborne debris region, which trigger IRC requirement for protection of glazed openings like your windows and skylights. And again, Eric will cover how to protect exterior openings from windborne debris and wind pressures very shortly. So when windborne debris strikes and perforates the building envelope, it can cause higher pressures inside of the building, and it can, which increases the probability of structural damage. And then water infiltration from wind-driven rain, and also it can cause the risk of occupant injury or death. So now we're going to get into how to mitigate some of these risks. This first slide provides some lower level of effort wind mitigation actions. One easy thing you can do is to secure anything around your yard that can become windborne debris, such as trash cans, outdoor furniture, and grills. Yard debris can be picked up and disposed of, and if you are comfortable talking with your neighbors and making that same request, then you can go ahead and ask them to do the same thing. Damaged or old tree branches and removing any trees which are a fall hazard to your home can also help protect you and your house. Gutters can be cleaned out and secured. Leaves and other debris can prevent gutters and downspouts from working properly and weigh them down, which makes it easier for winds to whisk them off and potentially damage your home. Any of the gutter spikes, brackets, or screws can either be replaced or tightened, but be careful not to over tighten, which can cause some of your gutters to crack. And if you see any gaps at the back of the gutter, these can be filled with scrap wood and clear epoxy. Finally, cracks and gaps around things such as skylights and windows, roof vents, and AC units can be sealed with caulk. In severe storms, a well-sealed exterior will help you keep out the wind-driven rain. There are a lot of different kinds of caulk for various projects and locations, so just be sure to read and select the correct one for the right job and conditions. Typically, the rubber or acrylic caulk are recommended for outdoor use. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to Eric so he can discuss some other wind mitigation actions for existing homes.
All right. Hey, thanks, Sam. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. As Sam mentioned, my name is Eric Stafford. We're going to talk about some retrofit measures and projects that you can do. We'll start from kind of easy things that you can do yourself, and then work our way towards things that you probably want to get a contractor involved in, or at least have some help with. When we say retrofit, and I'm going to try to keep the terms, a lot of with the codes and with the standards and the things that we do, they're written in kind of a technical nature, but so I'm going to try to use more commonly used terms where I can. But if there's a term that we do use that you don't know what it means or really what it is, feel free to type that into the box, and Adam will be glad to let you know what it is. But the first one we'll start with is protecting openings. Sam mentioned this earlier. Openings are anything within the building envelope, such as an opening within the building envelope, like a window. In the codes we refer to these as glazed openings, like a door, a garage door, Yeah, most of you are aware that these are vulnerable parts of the building because when a hurricane is approaching and we see the news, we see people going out to buy plywood or OSB or some type of protection to cover up the window or the door. Now it's important to to protect these openings for a number of reasons. One is when windows break, a large, if it's not an impact resistant window or one designed to resist impact, you're going to have a large opening. You're going to allow wind and water infiltration, which is going to do a lot of damage. With regard to the wind coming into the building, the key issue with that is that you increase the wind loads on the interior of the building. So we have, as the wind's blowing over the outside of the building, it's pulling on the roof and it's pulling on the walls and pushing in some other areas. When you have a large opening, such as a window, the wind comes in and it starts pushing from the underside on the roof, adding additional loads that the building probably was not designed for, and can be particularly problematic with older construction. So there are a number of ways you can protect your windows. If it's an existing home, the easiest way is to put up some kind of shutter, or what we refer to as an impact-resistant covering. You want to look for one that make sure it has a label on it indicating it's been tested. There are many different types. There's metal panels, there's screen shutters, there's fabrics, there's accordions, there's all kinds of mechanically operated ones, but they're all there to resist impact from debris to protect that window or the glazed opening. The cheapest thing you can do, and probably the easiest thing, is to put plywood over the opening. Now, as mentioned on the slide here, Sam mentioned the IRC, the International Residential Code. That's the code that applies for a single-family dwelling. There is a prescriptive method, meaning when we say prescriptive, it's a cookbook method for using 7/16" plywood or OSB, how to attach it. Because the last thing you want to do is put up a piece of plywood or OSB and put some type of fastener or screw or nail in the four corners. And then when the storm hits, that winds up being debris. So that winds up impacting, potentially someone else's house and leaves your opening exposed. So you need to make sure that it's fastened correctly. One thing I'll also note regarding the IRC with new construction now, the fastening methods for this plywood or OSB, it has to be a permanent method attached to the building. You're not allowed to use screws or nails to attach plywood. It has to be like a permanent anchorage. A lot of times you'll see on a lot of these like the metal panels and the screens, these types of shutters, you'll see the post around the buildings. Around the openings for using like a wing nut or some other type of attachment. You have to, for new construction now, you'll have to do the same thing for if you're going to use a wood structural panel. Let me go to the next slide. The more expensive option is, but a lot of people, I know in a lot of areas we're seeing people replace their windows for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes for energy efficiency, sometimes for just the overall look. If you're in a hurricane-prone region, you should look at, if you're going at a window replacement, get windows that are impact resistant. They're tested the same way the shutters are. We don't have a picture here, but I'll show you later on when we talk about a little bit about new construction. These windows are designed to resist the impact of debris. And they will crack, but they won't allow the missiles to penetrate the building, therefore keeping out wind and keeping out water as well. Sam mentioned these documents. You're going to hear these over and over again. The P499 fact sheet series, fact sheet number 6.2. give some pretty good guidance on attaching plywood shutters and how you can. And this would not be for new construction. This would be for an existing building where you're trying to. It's kind of an emergency protection situation. And then also FEMA P804, which we'll talk about more as we move along. But additional guidance similar to and consistent with the fact sheet series. Another large opening in the building envelope are garage doors, and we see the failure of garage doors causing significant structural damage because it's when they fail, it's significant structural damage. Because of the large opening created in the building envelope. Same with garage doors. You can either protect that garage door with an impact resistant covering, or you can replace the garage door with one that's been tested, preferably for impact, but it definitely needs to be tested for the design pressures that are applicable for the area. And this group is called the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. They do a lot of testing of various building components and elements. And one thing they have found recently about garage doors is that the most important thing about garage doors is that they're labeled, that they have a label on them, and that it indicates some type of design pressure. Okay, as I know the public and people like to talk about wind speed. But from an engineering perspective and what we're looking for in codes, what we're really interested in is what we call the design pressure. So you want to look on if you're looking at replacing your garage doors, make sure there's a label on the garage door and that it has some type of DP rating on it. It should match whatever the DP rating is of the area. But if it doesn't have a label on it at all or any type of DP rating, you might as well look for a different garage door. All right, let's keep moving. All right, let's talk a little. We talked about openings. We just said we want to try to keep from having openings in the building, but we know that we do need to have some openings in the buildings for ventilation purposes, whether it be on the roof or it be in gable ends or in soffit, which is what we're going to talk about now. A soffit may or may not be a term you're familiar with, but it's basically where you have a roof overhang. It's that portion that covers the underside of the roof overhang. Okay. Now, when the soffit stays in place, some water still does get in the building, but not near as much. When the soffit fails, as shown in this picture here, as you know from hurricanes, the wind's blowing laterally, and rain is coming in, and that's just an easy invitation for water to come into the building and cause significant water damage inside the building. I can't tell you how many hurricanes that we've investigated in Florida where the building on the outside, as we drive up to it, looks relatively undamaged. We can tell some of the soffits are damaged, and as you get closer and look inside, and there's sheetrock and insulation all over the place where water came in through the soffits. So there's one of the most common soffit materials that we see is vinyl soffit. And it's you might when you look at it, it looks like some type of plastic. It's a rigid polyvinyl chloride type plastic, and it's it's from the Vinyl Siding Institute. But let me go ahead and get to the next slide here, because I wanted to show you something. The problem is with where oftentimes where it's connected to the house. A lot of times that vinyl soffit panel is what we call floated in another small little plastic channel. So oftentimes it's not connected as we show in this figure. This figure is the proper way to install a soffit. But oftentimes we see a lack of nailer here, and there's this little small channel right there, and the soffit panel just sits in that channel, so it flops around when the wind's blowing, and it's easily dislodged. And when it's dislodged, then of course we have wind-driven rain coming into the building. Okay. The other key point from this figure, and one of the key recommendations from the 499 and P804, is limiting the span of this soffit panel. The span, we're talking about the distance from the wall out to the edge of the roof there. This distance here should not exceed 12 inches unless you have an intermediate support like what we have shown here. Okay, so we won't get into all the details of this figure, but this figure comes from P804, and some of you may not understand completely, but your contractor should be able to look at this drawing and make the retrofits if you're looking at strengthening your soffits so that they conform with this diagram. There are there is another method that you can do. It's not as good as making sure that both ends of the soffit panel are nailed and fastened correctly, but it will. If you don't have the money or the capability to be able to make a full retrofit on the soffit, this is one method here that works pretty good. It's probably best described as an improvement. But again, we see in this picture up here, we see the vinyl soffit panel. Like I was mentioning earlier, it's kind of this plastic material with holes in it to allow the attic area to ventilate. And then this little channel here, like I was talking about earlier, often that's attached to the wall, and the panel's just floating or sitting in that channel. So what you can do to increase the resistance at this point here, because this is where it's weak, one of the points has to be fastened either out at the roof or at the wall. Okay. So, and almost all the time it's fastened at the edge of the roof and left floating in this area. You can apply a bead of a polyurethane sealant, apply it at the bottom of the channel, and then also apply it where the soffit goes into that the soffit panel goes into that J channel. That's going to give you some improved wind resistance. Like I said, you cannot do that for new construction. Does not comply with the code, but it is one retrofit that will improve the performance of your soffit. Because, like we said, we know from experience that vented soffits don't keep out all water, but if they stay in place, they'll keep out most of the water. Other vents. There we go. Other vents, there are other openings in the envelope. Ridge vents, those can be a problem if they're not attached correctly. Gable end vents, these are the vents that are in the triangular portion of your let me see how to describe it. The gable end, without going into any detail. We had a picture of it right up here a minute ago. I might go back here. Yeah, okay, so here's talking about a gable. This is the gable right here. So a lot of times you'll see vents where we have this window here. There'll be a vent in there, which is also an invitation for water during hurricanes. So P804 also addresses how to deal with these other vents, how to strengthen ridge vents. For gable end vents, it's best to cover those up when a hurricane is approaching. Off-ridge vents, gable rake vents, and turbines. These are covered in 804 and pretty thoroughly in P499 fact sheet as shown on this slide here. All right. Now let's talk a little bit about some contractor projects, and these are things that really more than anything, I want you to be aware of. Particularly when you're re-roofing. At some point in time, unless you're buying a new home every 10 years, you're likely going to need a new roof. Whether it was damaged from a hurricane or it's just worn out. P804 and P499 both give you some guidance on what to do when you're re-roofing, and also some improvements to the roof when you're not replacing the roof. Okay, the roof is really our first line of defense. I mean, it keeps the rain out along with the walls and the siding. But if we get an opening or a tear in the roof, we've got big problems on the inside of the building. 499 has 6 fact sheets that address roofing, and there's things you can do. Won't go into all the details, but this figure shows here if you're not replacing the roof, you can do things like put a spray polyurethane inside the attic area, and what that will do, that will strengthen as you can see where the plywood is attached to the joist. It will strengthen that attachment and also will minimize water intrusion in the event the roof covering is lost. Okay, the best thing to do, or the best roof mitigation strategy, is when you're re-roofing, because when you pull that roof covering off, you get to do a couple of other things that are going to work out better in the long run. You can secure the roof deck. Okay, often on older homes, especially ones built prior to 2000, a lot of roof sheathing was put down with staples, which doesn't work well against wind. Or the smaller size nails were allowed by the code years ago. And then once you get the roof deck re-nailed, then you can put on what we call a sealed roof deck, or it's a secondary water barrier. And there are a number of ways you can do it. You probably have seen or heard someone talk about roofing felt. Okay, we in the codes we call that underlayment. Well, you can, if you put that felt on correctly or the right way, it can act as a sealed roof deck or that secondary water barrier. And there's also other products, these what we call peel and stick products, that you peel off a layer and you stick it directly to the roof. Those things will and then there's synthetic underlayments as well. The whole idea is when you I don't think we have a picture of this here. I was just thinking about this, about the problems with the roof. But when you lose your roof covering, there are the joints in the plywood or the OSB, and those joints just allow water to pour through. Okay, so that's why it's so important to keep the roof covering on and seal the joints of the roof decks to keep the water out. All right, so here's an example. This was in the Panama City area from Hurricane Michael. The owner of this home had a sealed roof deck. He used the peel and stick over his entire roof, and some debris from a nearby home pierced the roof covering, and we were able to talk to him on the phone. He didn't have any water damage inside his home. But these are the sealed roof deck. These systems that are in some of the documents we're going to talk about in a few minutes, whether it be using the felt in a certain way and fastening in a certain way, or using the peel and stick products or synthetic products, they've all been tested by this Insurance Institute for Business Home Safety that we discussed earlier, and they effectively keep water out of your house in the event your roof covering is lost. Okay. And this little figure here. This is just showing what we described earlier, that when you replace the roof covering, you can evaluate what kind of fasteners that your roof deck was put down with. If it's staples, for example, we've shown here, the contractor can easily go back and add additional nails, or if it were smaller nails and they were spaced too far apart, you can add additional nails, and it's recommended that you use these what's called ring shank nails instead of regular smooth nails. So these nails have on the shank part of the nail, they have little circular ridges, so that when they're driven into the framing, very difficult to get out. Have much stronger resistance to uplift or pull off than smooth type nails. All right, so one last thing to mention on retrofits, contractor projects are gabled in, and as you probably noticed, as we're talking, some of the things we're talking about These are weak points in building systems, things that we've observed over the years to consistently be problems. Gabled ends are one of those. It's a large, like we said earlier, this being the gable. It's a large area that relies on connections and fasteners to stay in place. And we see these fail in a lot of different instances. P804 has a section that deals specifically with retrofitting that gabled end wall. And what it is, it's a series of braces. If you can get in the attic and get access to the attic, and that's the whole intent behind it, is being able to make this retrofit without having to remove any siding or remove any particular building element. But this particular retrofit project here, series of braces, metal straps, and nails will go a long way to strengthening that gabled end that gabled end. All right. I'm going to summarize next couple of slides because we just hit on some of the high points. The FEMA P804 and 499 are pretty lengthy documents, but they go into the various retrofits and mitigation measures in an in-depth fashion. 804, some of the key topics are identifying the risk and the level of protection. And we'll talk about that here on the next slide. It'll also talks a little bit about building codes and cost benefit, and what you need to do with permits and inspections. In addition to the technical design methods, some of which we talked about here, we'll talk about a continuous load path, and we talk about new construction in a minute. Protecting openings, that's critical, and that's something that's easily done. And can be inexpensive. And then, of course, reinforce or replace garage doors, bracing gable roof framing, roof cover replacements, securing the roof deck when you are replacing the roof. And then also it addresses some of the other easy items like Sam mentioned, like exterior equipment and tree fall and so on. Okay. When we talked about or mentioned the desired level of protection, 804 is kind of set up in a tiered approach. It's very similar to a program we'll discuss in a minute called Fortified. And some of you may have heard of Fortified, which is administered by that IBHS group I mentioned earlier. But in 804, there's a basic mitigation package, and then there's an intermediate, and then an advanced. And the basic mitigation package is mainly dealing with the roof. And it gives you guidance on what you can do with roof replacement, some of which we talked about, and then things you can do if you're not replacing the roof. Then you step up to the intermediate, and then it deals with protecting the openings, windows and garage doors, bracing gabled end walls, and strengthening attached structures. Then, of course, the last item, the advanced mitigation package, includes developing a continuous load path and protecting windows, entry doors, and garage doors from windborne debris and wind pressure. I mentioned P499. This is a series of fact sheets. It's broken up into, like I said, 37 fact sheets that you can download. They give recommendations on a variety of different things, from some of which we talked about today. It also talks about continuous load path, siding, and some other things, but all aimed at improving the performance of buildings from wind and flood forces. Another, when you look at 804, I mean, if you download it 499, they look formidable because they're pretty big. But another document that FEMA put together in the aftermath of Hurricane Michael is it's called a recovery advisory, and you might look at it as like an index, because it takes the important things, many of the things which we've talked about today, and more or less kind of indexes those and tells you where to go get that information. It does give you a little information about why certain things are important. And there's a number of figures and diagrams, and pictures to show you, why it's important and specifically where to go to get information on making these retrofits and mitigation measures. All right, Sam, you want to take it from here?
Sure, thanks, Eric. All right, so we're gonna touch a little bit on things you can do when damages for manufactured housing units, or MHUs. And the two big things we're gonna talk about are anchorage and then appurtenance connections. So on this slide, we talk about anchorage, and proper anchorage is really important for the MHU structure to resist sliding or even rolling over in high winds. The number and type of anchors is actually site dependent, but a good place you can start to kind of confirm everything looks okay and you've got the correct number is you can contact your local building department and they can confirm the required number of tie downs for the MHU for your jurisdiction. It may also be a good idea, since it is dependent on the specific site, like the soil properties. It may also be advisable to contact a registered design professional, like a geotech engineer, to ensure the number and type of tie downs also meet the specific site conditions for that MHU. Another good place to check for information is the manufactured guidelines, and these can provide the appropriate tension of the straps as well as other information about the anchoring system that's specific to that MHU. You can also do some good visual checks. These should be performed routinely, and it's just checking that the straps are straight and tight and they're not loose, bent, or misshapen. You should also check the straps and ground anchors for signs of corrosion or any other visual damage. And if you find corrosion or other damage, you should replace those straps as soon as you can. The top photo shows a newly installed manufactured housing unit that has a misaligned anchor strap. And then the bottom shows one that has the strap attached to the exterior wall base, but it's loose. So those would be two things that you could pick up just walking around the MHU. So the last two slides for manufactured housing units focus on different appurtenances that can be attached, such as a carport or a covered porch, both of which are particularly vulnerable to wind loads. And this is something that FEMA sees a lot in their post-disaster investigations. Extensive wind-driven rain intrusion or even structural damage to the MHU is frequently started when an improperly attached appurtenance is blown off or damaged during high winds. They break away from the manufactured housing unit and they leave openings at the failed connections. And this allows rainwater to enter the building envelope, and it can also start kind of a cascading effect of structural damage. And as a side note, MHUs are quite vulnerable to any type of water intrusion. And so even if you just have the wind-driven rain damage, this can be quite extensive. You can see in this photo, and this was following Hurricane Irma in Florida, a covered porch was blown off of the manufactured housing unit, and the structural damage and water intrusion caused by this resulted in a red tag being placed on the manufactured housing unit to indicate that it was condemned by local officials. So the best thing you can do is to have the MHU appurtenances built as standalone units without a structural connection to the MHU itself. If they are attached, there should be plans prepared that clearly detail the connection. The photo on this slide is another example that was following Hurricane Irma that we saw, where the carport detached from the unit, opening the building envelope up across the top of the wall. This one was also condemned by local officials due to the extent of the damage. And it should be noted here that the wind speed that caused this type of damage was over 60 miles an hour less than the actual design wind in this area. So FEMA has a good manufactured housing resource. It's FEMA P85, and it covers typical characteristics of manufactured homes and also covers the NFIP and HUD code requirements at the time of the publication. It was published in 2009. And it also has the results of some FEMA test programs. The FEMA maps, like Eric had talked about with Recovery Advisory 2 following Hurricane Michael, also came out with a few resources that talk about manufactured housing units. Hurricane Irma has some conclusions and recommendations for ways to mitigate manufactured housing units, and there was also the February 2007 tornadoes in Florida. And there was 2 different RAs published after that, and they include the observations made by the MAT again, as well as the conclusions and actionable recommendations, and both are available online. And with that, I will pass it back to Eric to finish up today's presentation with new construction consideration.
Okay, thanks, Ann. Yeah, last couple of slides, we're going to talk a little bit about new construction and things you should be looking for, or perhaps things that you should be asking for if you're looking at building a new house. The first thing, and this one, I hate to use the term no-brainer, but you should see this if you're building a new home in the hurricane-prone region. You should see metal connectors like shown in this drawing all over the home, where the roof connects to the roof framing, connects to the wall. There should be some type of metal connector. The type of connector will vary depending on a lot of different factors. What the wind speed risk in your area is, the span of the roof, slope of the roof, a number of factors. But you should definitely see something other than bare wood up there. You shouldn't just see nailed connections. You should see some type of metal in this area. Same thing from floor to floor and from floor down to your foundation. That helps create this, what we call a continuous load path. And that's important because the wind's going to pull in this direction, and it's going to push in this pull and push in this direction. And what we want to do is make sure that these where the various parts of the building are connected, make sure they stay connected and stay together. Okay, that's what when we're talking about our continuous load path. We want this load, wherever it came from, to be transmitted all the way down to the foundation. Okay, so just look, if you're building a new house during the framing stages, look and make sure you see some type of metal connectors at every connection in the building. The next item, we talked about this, is the sealed roof deck. And with the newest version of the residential code, now I don't even think it's been printed yet. So it certainly hasn't been adopted by anywhere yet, not in Louisiana for sure. But at some point down the future, a sealed roof deck will be required in the hurricane-prone region because it's in the 2021 IRC. And like I said earlier, this is particularly for new construction or when you're replacing your existing roof, you have to put underlayment down. So this is not a hugely expensive proposition because you can use the customary underlayment felt. Or what, like I said earlier, a lot of people call it tar paper or roofing felt, asphalt underlayment. It's called a number of different things, but it's you can use 2 layers of that and fasten it as the code requires, or you can use the peel and stick material. You can put it over the whole roof. We're seeing a lot more of that nowadays than we used to. Another option is to take that peel and stick material and just cover the joints in the roof deck. Because that's the critical part. When the roof covering is lost, the water can easily come in through the joints in the roof deck. This picture here, this was a new home. This is after it was in the Panama City area, was impacted by Hurricane Michael. It was built in 2017. Relatively minor damage. Lost. You can see it's hard to see from the in the overhead photo here, but we could zoom in and see it had some roof cover damage, obviously right where the tarp was, and also had a window broken on one side of the building. But might consider that minor damage. But this is what the inside of it looked like when we were there. All the gypsum board or sheetrock, furniture, furnishings, everything, carpet, everything taken out because it got most everything got wet. Perhaps it got mold and mildew. We don't know. But just from that little bit of damage there caused this major damage on the inside of the building. So a sealed roof deck, if you're putting on a new roof or buying a new house, that's something you definitely want to talk to your contractor about and ask for. The other thing is making sure that you have impact resistant products, whether they be an impact resistant glazing product. That means a window. If you have a window that's impact resistant, like we said earlier, it doesn't have to be protected with a shutter or some type of impact resistant device. It is in and of itself resistant to impacts from debris. Make sure you have those. If you're in a windborne debris region, as defined by the code, you're going to be required to have some type of impact resistant product, whether it be the glass or protect it with an impact resistant covering, such as a shutter. And those can be, like we mentioned earlier, there are a number of types: metal panels, fabric. There's a number of electric different types of shutters that can be remotely closed. There's even some now. If you had a vacation home that you couldn't get to, that they can be remotely closed with an app on your mobile phone. Okay, so definitely, if you're in a hurricane-prone region, you should consider this. If you're in a windborne debris region, you're going to be required to have some type of protection on the glazed openings. All right. Last couple of things. I mentioned Fortified earlier. Fortified is a program administered by the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, that IBHS that we talked about earlier. And it's a program. I hate to say, I wouldn't use the term mirrors, but it's similar to P804 in that it gives varying levels of mitigation packages. Fortified Roof is similar to the basic mitigation package, and that focuses on some of the things we talked about earlier: having a sealed roof deck installed, wind-rated roof covering, and protecting vents and so on. And then there's Fortified Silver, which is a step up from that, similar to the 804 basic mitigation package too. And then there's Fortified Gold. And depending on where you are, there's a potential for benefits on your homeowner's insurance. But again, it depends on where you are. In Alabama, for example, coastal Alabama, there's been a surge in fortified homes because the state mandated that that you get certain discounts on your wind premium on your homeowner's insurance. And it's pretty significant, starting with Fortified Roof all the way to Fortified Gold. So we're seeing, particularly in Baldwin County, which is right there on the coast of Alabama, a significant number of fortified homes being constructed, Fortified Roof and Fortified Gold. Okay. The other thing, make sure, just another point, make sure that the materials that you're using, the siding, make sure that it's rated for the region that you're in. And siding, again, will have a design pressure rating. Okay, and I know that's a concept that if you're not involved in codes and stuff, it may be a little bit foreign, but from the code perspective, those are how windows, siding, a lot of roofing, and other products are given a rating. They're not given a rating by wind speed. If you see a product that says rated for 140 miles an hour, it's likely I'd be careful with that because it's hard to rate a product for a wind speed because of all the different factors. But we're not going to get into all that. But bottom line is remember what you've learned today. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask on this webinar. And also, speaking of questions, there's the Building Science Helpline, the number here, or the website. You can go, you can ask a question, no charge, and someone, perhaps Sam, might be answering your question. Again, we want to thank all of you for joining us today, and that concludes our presentation. I guess Loretta will open it up now for questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Eric and Samantha. That was really good, but we do have a couple of questions inside of our question and answers. I'm not for sure if anyone has had a chance to take a look at it. It's from Sean Foley. could answer that while
Yeah,
just give him a couple of
I see
answers.
Adam's answering. I can't. I'm not reading all of it, but I guess he's. Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about synthetic underlayments, yeah, starting to see a lot more of that, and particularly in Florida and Alabama, these synthetics are a little bit tend to be a little bit cheaper, but they can also function as be used as, to make a sealed roof deck. Like we mentioned earlier, as long as a couple of key things about the synthetics, and Adam, you may be answering this, I don't know, but a couple of key things is it has to be an approved alternate to a type 2 felt, which is what people refer to as a 30-pound felt. Okay, as long as it's an approved alternate to that type 2 felt, it can be used. And then you just double it up. It's like a double layer system, same as you'd use with the felt, fasten it the same way, and you'll get the same benefit from the synthetic underlayment as you do from the felt underlayment.
Another question from Tall Paul. How does stucco hold up to high wind?
Yeah, I mean, generally pretty well, as long as it's put on in accordance with the reference standard in the building code. There's specific requirements on attaching the lath and the mixtures and whatnot. But real stucco, not the stuff called EIF or EFIS as we call it, the exterior insulation finish systems, which is not really stucco. It just kind of looks like it. But real stucco put on accordance with ASTM, I think it's C926, generally performs pretty well. But like anything else, if it's not put on, not done correctly, not done in accordance with the reference standards, it could have problems as well.
Well, Eric and Samantha, thank you so much for your questions and for joining us.